This is Ambazonia Calling. News, analysis, commentary, opinion, editorials. Ambazonia Calling is a co-production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. Welcome. My name is Ntumfoyn, Herbert, and I bring revolutionary greetings from our studios in Washington, D.C. to all of you, friends of Ambazonia and fellow Ambazonians on ground zero and across the globe.
World powers, including the United States, are urging Yaoundé hold third-party mediated negotiations without preconditions. I am innocent here.
When President Biya called for a dialogue, what he was really saying is, I can't defeat you militarily.
No one deserves better or higher pay from La République du Cameroon out there than Ambassador Cohen for telling Ambazonians that Southern Cameroon does not deserve independence. This is Willie Broad Ade.
I want to think only of Abdul Karim, but I can't. There are too many of my people in the wrong place at this time, and I have only one person to blame. This is the monk.
They traveled to the Cameroons in the hope of landing some juicy deals. The only thing they won were positions of shame in Nyamfuka. This is Veronique Betinfe.
If you live anywhere on ground zero, you must continue to deny consent to be misruled or governed by the colonial bastards from La République.
Though the Security Council is the UN's most powerful body, it is the political graveyard of the Ambazonia restoration quest.
This is the mechanic. God is alive and very much involved in this struggle.
Evil has a way of biting the devil in the butt. That is what is befalling the Biya regime. This is Tani Jude Agua Ozugen.
France is the mask behind the colonial juju called La République. This is Lambert Mbom.
One must wonder what some of these guys coming up with these money-making schemes are smoking. Ambazonia's quest to restore its independence, an exercise in honesty and determination, or an effort in scamming and excelsis. This is Manjang Jurambe.
The mere acknowledgement that Ambazonia has special status is confession that La République does not have sovereignty over Southern Cameroon. This is Tani Jude Agua Ozugen.
This is edition number 065 of Ambazonia Calling, coming to you this 13th day of October 2019.
Oh, freedom, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, oh yes, I'm free.
We would like to open this edition of Ambazonia Calling where we've never opened before, right there on ground zero, in the midst of a battle out there in Malende, in Ambazonia Southern Zone. The forces involved, the Emitrix of Malende fighting La République colonial forces. At the very opening of this audio, you can hear that our restoration forces are up against the Republic forces in armored personnel carriers using heavy artillery, and yet they are not ceding ground. The entire audio is really 6 minutes long. We've edited it down to 3 minutes, and you can hear restoration forces prompting each other on what to do. You can hear them call out to colleagues who are fallen back. You can hear them complain about running out of bullets, and you can hear them tell each other when to retreat, when to go forward. Malende, for those of you who don't know, is a roadside settlement just outside of Muyuka as you head towards Kumba from BOYO.
The metrics on attack. The metrics of Malende.
One of the bravest parts is to just hear those guys, in spite of being outmarched and outgunned, just chasing down at La Republique soldiers and saying, Matrix, kill them all. This is real, people of Ambazonia. This is what our people have to go through every day. One of the main reasons why the support they need, the support they deserve should continue to flow to them.
Let's kill them all. Kill them all, okay.
Restoration forces doing it big time in Malende. Matrix, bravo.
Ana figu mula mapina kafi stop jam chimala ama yenyama bonta ibusula lilina fata su bonta. That's what the king said. That's what the king said to the messenger. Tum tuma bene bwebo ala anyama bozu zento. This lion down the valley, I know the shepherd them divani. Hey, leaving the lion and the lamb with the broken leg, left at the mercy for the lion just to chop it up. She got her back against the wall. She had to fight for her life. She had to stand, she couldn't die without the fight. Whoa, 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 yeah.
It is gun battles like the one we just listened to there in Malende that tell you exactly on whose side God is in this battle for justice in Ambazonia. Here is the mechanic reminding Ambazonians that this battle is also God's battle, and for them to remember the God factor in this revolution.
God is alive and very much involved in this struggle. Biya can never take us out. Weber was right. Even the French army can come down and they will never take us out, because the God who is leading us is stronger than them all. Because if the Jews, the 10 spies, if they had joined the other 2, they would have accessed their land without anybody dying. Can you believe that? But because of 10 people who would not believe God, they lost everybody that was of a fighting age. And there were, an army of 600,000 plus? Those of us who are playing the bad games in this struggle, you will you will not make it. If you are into this struggle with selfish tendencies, I can guarantee you, you're not going to make it. I'm not saying this to condemn anybody. I'm saying we should clean up, think of our act, be the servants we called up to be, because that's all we are, servants. God is using to set his people free. We cannot afford to forget about the God who has made it hard for Biya to have his plans carried out. I know some of us think that it is thanks to our audacious or whatever other powers we trust in. But I can tell you, there's only one God. All other powers are powerless in his presence. The God of Ambazonia has brought us this far. We have to be careful what we do. We are almost there. We must be careful. This very God we're talking about here is not a respecter of persons. He's unchanging. He is just. The selfish interest has to stop. The taking of what God is doing and receiving the praise will destroy you. Those who are caught in the selfishness are going to pay a huge price. You come in here with an agenda, you are not going to make it. I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just saying we should remember the God factor. The God factor of this struggle is actually where our salvation is. We don't have to sweat too much. It is crucial. It is the only very active thing happening to us. When I say we, I hope you're not thinking that every Ambazonian believes in God. It is always about the faithful few. That's all God needs. Faithful few. Few with God is greater than majority, way better than majority. and you can gather the whole world, they will never be able to overcome one person God has decided to use. Let us factor in the God factor, so we will not be running around in circles and focusing on things that may not necessarily help us. This is the mechanic.
Ambazonia Calling. You are in the heart of the news shrine. Call us the Kalakuta Republic of commentary, opinion, and editorials.
Let us rewind our show back to where we usually begin. Here is Bobe Lambenbaum with our editorial for the week.
Celestine Monga, renowned Cameroonian economist, identifies one of our curses as excellence as individuals, but the inability to deliver anything meaningful collectively. The Ambazonian revolution is stuck in that curse. It is precisely when the world expects us to stand together that Ambazonians are working in desperate ranks against each other, even when the colonizer is the winner. It is now that Ambazonians are beckoning on La République and France to take advantage of the cracks within our ranks. We all know this will end up in negotiations, but so many would not have any negotiations if they were initiated by another group. We have leaders go out and reject negotiations already offered only to state that they want negotiations with the same international players who are already at the table in the negotiations they are dismissing. You have people throwing up conditions for going into negotiations, which the international community wants without preconditions, as if they will have the last word on conditions. Every Ambazonian knows that France is the mask behind the colonial juju called La République. To cause Ambazonians to reject internationally supervised negotiations, it is easy for surrogates of the BR regime to say Switzerland and France are the same thing. If that were indeed the case, if the Swiss were in this only for their economic and other national interests, which other country can Ambazonians possibly name that would not have economic and national interest to defend? No negotiations will be perfect, and Ambazonians should embark on them in keeping with what does not kill us, does not hurt us. The Swiss-led process does not in any way prevent Ambazonians from continuing to do whatever they want on ground zero, and they certainly do not prevent those who claim they can produce better negotiations from delivering on their promise, not just on the empty talk. Give the people of Ambazonia the much better negotiations you claim are possible, and you would have walked the talk. With the world watching, our most important duty is to show good faith. We cannot be like La République and hope to be seen as different from them. So the real question is whether or not Ambazonians, brilliant people taken individually, can deliver anything good for Ambazonia collectively. Why is working together under the newly formed Ambazonia Coalition Team Act or Team Ambazonia a bad thing? Might it be because if we are too united, it would hurt our cause? Or is it really just because by uniting the many who want to play lone wolf will lose their significance? What merit is there really in splintering groups? Is it okay for AGOV-C, for instance, to work with a splinter of the IG group led by Siseko from jail just because it is another group? Or would AGOV-C stomach the emergence of a splinter of AGOV-C working with the Sako-led IG? Why does it make sense to demand funding from Ambazonians from 1,001 sources with claims of doing the same thing, yet not uniting in doing it together? No one will deliver Ambazonia for us. Not the Swiss, not the Norwegians, not La République, not the Americans, not the French. Ambazonians have a sacred duty to deliver a freed homeland to themselves, and the only way of doing so is forming one team to negotiate against La République and France in the presence of the international community. And if you ask me, that platform already exists under the Swiss-led process, which Ambazonians are invited to help set up and shape to deliver what we desire. The many excuses of not engaging at all are just what they are, excuses. The greatness of the one-man speech, ranting away all the nice things everyone has to hear about independence. The many speeches of leaders speaking exclusively to and satisfying the naughtiness of one's supporters gratify surrogates and supporters. But we know that of all that preaching to one's converted followers does not in any way move Ambazonia forward. The world awaits us at the table of negotiations in Switzerland, and Ambazonia can either be there or it can, very strangely, agree with La République that going before the world in one-on-one negotiations is somehow to the disadvantage of Ambazonia. Such a stand would constitute shooting Ambazonia in the foot. This is Lambert Mbom for Ambazonia Calling.
We have got a real estate deal made in heaven. If you are pre-qualified and are interested in a single family home in the Silver Spring area, contact ambercalling@yahoo.com. Write to ambercalling@yahoo.com. Only serious prospective buyers are welcome. The figures are beginning to emerge for the casualties in the month of September 2019, and from the look of things, there were no fewer than 168 Ambazonian civilians who were killed, slaughtered in cold blood, many of them executed by terrorist forces of La République du Cameroun in the month of September. Innocentia is here with the first part of our news wrap-up for the week.
Global leaders of Catholics and Protestant Christians joined with their Muslim brethren in a rare moment of ecumenical oneness to decry the abduction and continued detention of Cameroon's best-known Muslim scholar of the Bible, Abdul Karim Ali. In a special report dated London, S. Maguire cited Pope Francis, leader of the world's 1.2 billion Catholics, the Archbishop of Canterbury and leader of the Church of England, Justin Welby, and Sheikh Abdullah Awad al-Juhani, one of the imams of the Grand Mosque in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, as calling for the immediate and unconditional release of Abdul Karim Ali. Similar calls have been made by the Secretary General of the United Nations, the Swiss government, former Nigerian and Ghanaian presidents Obasanjo and Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings, by leaders of the International Committee of the Red Cross, the Secretary Generals of the Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, and the Special Rapporteur for Human Rights of the United Nations.
The United Nations Human Rights Council is an assembly of 47 countries which meets to discuss how to respond to human rights concerns around the world.
Michelle Bachelet, whose office has a team in the Cameroons at this moment gathering information for an upcoming explosive report on the war in Ambazonia.
Council members select individual experts to study particular topics or countries and visit countries to see how things really are.
A call by Secretary Chris Anu of the IG for the release of Abdul Karim Ali, or there will be a lockdown in Ambazonia, has been downplayed by nearly every other liberation movement, with some movements going so far as to state that they will do whatever is needed to ensure that no lockdown is enforced in Ambazonia should there be no release by the end of the 3-week ultimatum.
The fact that this national dialogue is taking place at all for some Cameroonians represents progress. However, hundreds of thousands of people displaced.
The so-called major national dialogue held by Colonial Cameroon in Yaoundé from 30th September to 4th October is being publicly acknowledged as a crying failure. Hardly is it over than world powers, including the United States, are urging Yaoundé to do what the world has been calling for ever since the start of the genocidal violence: hold third-party mediated negotiations without preconditions. In a press statement issued Friday by the U.S. Embassy in Yaoundé, the government of President Donald Trump calls on Ambazonia and La République du Cameroun to stop new acts of violence. Quote, "More violence is not the solution," the release says, urging the two parties to embark on an open dialogue without preconditions. Soon after the so-called dialogue closed in Yaoundé, the Biya regime shows its desperation at using the charade of domestic talks to run away from the internationally supported and supervised negotiations without preconditions currently being put in place by Switzerland and supported by the world's most important Western powers and international organizations. In an interview with reporters, Mr. Biya's Prime Minister, Dion Gute, said colonial Cameroon did not have a mediator in the ongoing genocidal violence, despite evidence forever archived on YouTube on the World Wide Web showing the same Dion Gute receiving officials of the Swiss government for an update of where they were with organizing the very negotiations Yaoundé now wants to claim they were never a party to. Even as Dion Gute told the lies with a straight face to journalists, leading to their publication, among others, in Jeune Afrique news magazine, the colonial regime could not get its act together. The report of the very so-called major national dialogue from which Dion Gute emerged saying the regime did not have a mediator admits on page 19 of the report in bulletin point number 8 that the regime of Biya mandated mediators to meet with those they called radicals in the diaspora. Talk of the lies of the regime catching up with it.
Going back to the pre-1972 Federation, in my view, would be the best solution. But of course, I'm sure there are other options.
Former American diplomat Ambassador Herman Cohen continues to reign on the Ambazonian Independence Party.
I'm not sure that an independent Anglophone region would be economically viable. And those who think that...
This week, he pompously stated in audio messages making its rounds on social media that his advice to Ambazonia is to consider control of oil an illusion and independence a pipe dream. What many Ambazonians consider insulting advice is in line with a line which Ambassador Cohen has not stopped repeating. The line strangely sounds like exactly what a lobbyist for La République du Cameroun would recommend, and it is to the effect that Southern Cameroonians should settle for federalism in a one and indivisible Cameroon with a K.
I some Tuesday, the primary school for the start. When I say when I begin them.
The British Southern Cameroon's Restoration Forces in Ginicom, BOYO State in Ambazonia's northern zone have said they are allowing schools to resume in one part of the state, liberated and under the control of Restoration Forces. In a video gone viral on social media, an officer of the BSCRF is seen advising a huge crowd of Ginicom residents to return to their homes, to send their children to community schools, to invite those who fled the war into colonial Cameroon to return. The release of the video has triggered fears that such a move is unlikely to go unchallenged by the terrorist forces of La République du Cameroun, who, it is believed, could launch a major military campaign to reassert control of the territory and use any such campaign to teach a lesson, as it were, to any other region that may be tempted to declare their territory liberated and under the control of restoration forces. You are listening to Ambazonia Calling, your space for educated news analysis, informed opinions and commentary towards the recognition of a free, independent Ambazonia. I am Innocent Chia. Stay with us.
What Cameroon has done to us, I want you never to forget. The pain they have brought to bear on this generation, I want you never to forget. Not out of hate, but so that the next generation will remember and make sure they do the things they are supposed to do, never to go through this again.
I will continue to play my part to ask the people of Southern Cameroon to take their revolution into their hands and continue the fight to liberate themselves.
I'm sorry to say, because of France's policies in Africa, in French Africa, the state of La République du Cameroun do not have any pressure on them to find a way to resolve this issue, because they are always thinking that no matter what happens, France will always be there to give them coverage.
Still ahead in this edition, we have The Devil Unmasked with Professor Emmanuel Tatamenta. We have a winner of the Nyamfuka of the Week. And we are not done until you have heard our letter to Joshua. So stay tuned, kick back, relax, and enjoy Ambazonia Calling.
As usual, Innocent is sticking with us. He's got the second part of our news wrap-up for the week.
Fellow Ambazonians, dear Southern Cameroonians.
Comrade Sako Ikome of the IG Group put out an audio this week in which he retraced the origins of contacts between Ambazonian liberation movements, pro-independence campaigners, and officials of the government of Switzerland. While the IG owns up to its role in being one of the groups to have reached out to the Swiss, the AGOC continued to bury its head in the sand, never once confessing that they were also at the origin of the contacts. As a matter of fact, some within AGOC enthusiastically sold the falsehood that they did not contact the Swiss until April of this year, whereas it is clear that the contact was established way back at the end of last year, 2018.
Helping them to escape. You are enabling the Republic to escape.
The self-styled field marshal of the Red Dragons of LEBIALEM state in Ambazonia's southern zone has lavished praise on the top official of the Biya regime, Minister Tassong.
I appreciate Minister Paul Tassong from Mombin,
who hails from LEBIALEM state, for what the field marshal turned musician turned paramount traditional ruler termed Tassong's very generous donations to the Red Dragons.
Me, if you I appreciate Paul Tassong when they sponsor Red Dragon. I appreciate from Senator when they sponsor Red Dragon.
Clashes among restoration forces have erupted once more in Guzang in MOMO state of Ambazonia's northern zone.
I'm going to head this way. No soldier, they don't can follow we suit for kiwi, she should go for her skin. And I don't go broke my head. I did son of a bush. I will say when I see people for Guzang, people for Ambazonia when I see them. Whether this would fight, don't be I say, me soldier identify soldier.
At least 2 volunteer self-defenders were reported killed in amber-on-amber friendly fire in Guzang this week in incidents that quickly went from shouting matches in the streets and at the marketplace on who has control of Guzang and who should be admitted or not.
Today, if any enter the Guzang again for any bar, when I say I no call we, the person when they enter a bar, I will face the person. I may be blind. I know you fear no man, you fear no face.
Ambazonians hope that whatever differences exist among restoration forces in Guzang, that there is no descent into the monstrous crimes that were committed there when self-defenders slaughtered fellow fighters in cold blood, some of them execution style, with their hands bound to their backs. The leader of the Ambazonia Governing Council, Dr. Cho Ayaba, is throwing around more threats about stopping those he calls enablers and talking hawkish when it comes to pursuing the independence war. In several online appearances, Dr. Cho Ayaba showed more disdain for anyone entertaining international mediation via the Swiss-led process for a negotiated settlement, expressed the wish that enablers forfeit citizenship, lose their passports, and be condemned to death. These threats of punishment came in a week when Dr. Cho Ayaba announced the launch of a special Ask Dr. Cho dial-in initiative.
I will make this a regular feature, which I will title Ask Dr. Cho Ayaba.
Not to be outdone, Dr. Ebenezer Akwanga of the African People's Liberation Movement, APLM, announced he was resuming regular online Facebook facilitated briefings to Ambazonians. He made 2 appearances before the end of the week, with a final appearance that coincided Saturday with another show from out of Finland featuring Dr. Ntumfoyn, who has been working over time to undermine international mediation by the Swiss. We recall that Dr. Ntumfoyn appeared in DC last year purporting that he was no longer a federalist. He was a full-blown independentist. But sources have since determined that Dr. Ntumfoyn, like Abu Bala, signed a deal with the devil in order to be granted a temporary presidential pardon following their 2017 abduction.
In Milou, Kumbu, know that there's different. Je veux parler en français pour que les gens comprennent ce que je suis en train de parler.
Finally, video footage allegedly of a defected BA that has joined the ranks of the ADF is making the rounds of social media.
On a déjà séparé avec le francophone camerounais, on est anglophone. Ici c'est notre terrain. Tous les conneries que vous envoyez ici, là, on vient mourir ici chaque jour, là, on ne voit même plus ça.
Wielding an AK-47 and in the company of other freedom fighters,
vous dites qu'on va garder l'arme de chasse. Et c'est ça, c'est l'arme de chasse. Ça, c'est l'arme de chasse. On dit à la République de foucher le camp. Quitte à notre terre.
The alleged defector stumbles between French, English, Pidgin, and Camfranglais to pass the message that it is a new dawn in Ambazonia and time for La République du Cameroun to withdraw its troops.
On dit à Biya qu'il faut qu'il ramasse tous les militaires qui vont rentrer ici pour aller à Yaoundé. Ouais. On dit bye bye à Biya.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.
I am Innocent Chia for Ambazonia Calling.
Another place. If you are Ambazonian, you're not going to find a show like this wherever you look in the world, on the World Wide Web. This is unique. This is Ambazonia Calling.
Welcome to our special interview segment, The Devil Unmasked. The truth out.
In lieu of the interview for The Devil Unmasked today, we are looking back at statements that have been made recently by retired American diplomat Herman Cohen, who seems very determined to rain on the independence parade of Ambazonia. Here's Wilbur Ade with that report.
That doesn't mean that I'm in favor of secession or what have you.
Herman Cohen continued his campaign against the independence of Ambazonia this week. Speaking at a town hall with Ambazonians in Boston, Ambassador Cohen shocked more than a few southern Cameroonians by repeating a series of outrageous falsehoods he should know better than to repeat.
As a federation, which gave them virtual complete autonomy,
especially because only a few days earlier, Ambassador Cohen was being presented as a mediator for and the voice of Ambazonia on behalf of the Ayuktabe faction of the IG and the AGOVC.
A situation like this requires mediation by a neutral party, and I have recommended the United States do it. But I noticed that the Swiss government has offered to do mediation, and I know they're very good, they're very professional, but I do go back to...
The man clearly does not have the facts right. He seems bent on rewriting history to include the fallacy that southern Cameroonians were given a third option in 1961 to gain outright independence, but elected freely to join La République du Cameroun.
The United Nations said, let's have a referendum among the Anglophones, and they can choose whether they want independence, be with Nigeria, or join Cameroon. Well, they joined Cameroon.
Much more subtle, but no less false, is Ambassador Cohen's claim that he did not know at the time of the May 20, 1972 referendum by Ijo that the whole thing was illegal.
I feel a little guilty because I was Director for Cameroonian Affairs in the State Department, and when President Ijo held that referendum, which abolished the federation, I did not realize, and nobody around me, and we have plenty of lawyers in the State Department, nobody realized that this was an illegal act.
Cohen did not need any legal luminaries to break it down for him. He could have interrogated any 5-year-old in the streets of southern Cameroon. He could have gotten the facts from the CIA fact book on Cameroon at the time.
And this could not be changed by a referendum held within Cameroon. So
he could have asked southern Cameroonians like Foncha, Fonlon, Gojidinka, Bobejoa, and the late human rights activist Albert Mokong, who were all crying foul.
I feel a little guilty for never having noticed that.
He could have seen the game Aïdjo was playing in Yaoundé from distant Washington without the need for special binoculars. And the cooked-up election results of the yes and we vote, which said 99.99% voted for and turnout was 98.2%, with only 176 people voting against, should have informed Cohen that this was a sham. Cohen is obviously human, and errors are possible, right? That will be easier to accept if Ambassador Cohen is not constantly adding salt to injury. In Boston, he said he never knew Ambazonians were second-class citizens until he had moved on to his other job at the World Bank.
So I really didn't start hearing about this until these intellectuals started visiting.
He even managed to blame SDF chairman Nijon Frundi for not bringing the matter up during a dinner they had in the U.S. ambassador's residence in Yaoundé in the late 90s.
Having dinner with Mr. Frundi in the American ambassador's house in Yaoundé, and he didn't talk anything about this issue of Francophone culture eclipsing Anglophone culture. He was just very critical of the government in Yaoundé for corruption and that sort of thing.
Are you kidding me? How about the 6 people who were shot to death during the launching of the SDF? How many GC-related fights had happened in the open with strikes and violent repression before that date? How many memoranda had so-called Anglophone elites written about this issue? How about the All-Anglophone Conference 1 and All-Anglophone Conference 2? Wasn't Ambazonian nationalism born out of these injustices that Gojidinka tried to address in the new social order? How could Ambassador Cohen feign such ignorance? To know how very intentional Ambassador Cohen's denial of the Ambazonian problem is, it bears reminding that this is the very man who recommended and finally convinced the U.S. government to back Eritrea's claim to independence.
I have my own experience mediating between Eritrea and Ethiopia in 1990 and 1991.
And he did so despite the fact that Eritrea had never been a country of its own. He says, for example, that Ambazonians who think they will ever inherit the oil in their land and seashores are having illusions.
The independent Anglophone side will get the oil. I think you're having illusions. That will never happen. We'll never get the oil.
Ambassador Cohen says so despite knowing that, as in the case of the Sudans, the issue of oil, which is found in South Sudan, could be resolved through a revenue-sharing arrangement. In fact, it is hard not to notice that Ambassador Cohen is on a mission, a very dangerous mission to discourage Ambazonians from seeking the restoration of their independence.
I'm not sure that an independent Anglophone region would be economically viable. And those who think that...
Did I mention that this is the same man some had tried to sell to Ambazonians only a few weeks ago as a mediator and the voice of Ambazonia?
I think there'd be more benefits being in a relationship with the Francophone Cameroonians, because then you can share in the oil revenue, for example.
So far, everything he has been saying shows he is, in fact, the voice of La République du Cameroun.
But my feeling is going back to the pre-1972 federation would be an ideal solution.
If he is not yet on the payroll of La République, he's been cheated out of his due by the colonial regime in Yaoundé. 4. No one deserves better or higher pay from La République du Cameroon out there than Ambassador Cohen for telling Ambazonians at an event paid for by Ambazonians that Southern Cameroon does not deserve independence even in 2019.
Going back to the pre-1972 Federation, in my view, would be the best solution. But of course, I'm sure there are other options that are possible.
There's been no one out there playing the drag Ambazonia down game more than Ambassador Cohen, and those who ever thought he should or could be a mouthpiece for Ambazonia, now or in the future, ought to be apologizing to our people for such a heresy. This is Willibrod Ade for Ambazonia Calling.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
If peace means accepting second-class citizenship, then I don't want it. If peace means keeping my mouth shut in the midst of evil and injustice, then I don't want it. If peace means being complacent and accepting the status quo, then I don't want it. If peace means being passive, then I don't want it. If peace means a willingness to be exploited and humiliated, then that's the kind of peace that I don't want. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Something is killing me slowly, and I'm feeling so lonely. But this thing I must to talk, oh. All my people, they for bush, oh. And our children are they go for school, oh. But nobody fit to talk, oh. We get to plenty, so many things where we really want to complain to you. See these people where they kill us, not the people where they got for protect me, yeah. Our children, they for prison. Our leaders, they for prison. Now they calling for dialogue. Now who and who go talk, oh. That's why we pray to God. Heal our land, heal our land, heal our land. Cause all our people are dying, and our mothers are crying. Heal our land, heal our land, heal our land. Cause all our children are dying, and our mothers are crying. But I don't know what's up, oh, at all, oh. This war is bigger, and one man of it put a stop, oh. So make we put some more together, oh. I see plenty people don't die, and the house they went up, and I saw the people they need so far. Everybody running helter-skelter, the children they need suffer, there is no food and shelter. Our children down the suffer, while the leaders living la vida loca, yeah. So now who's how we go, so Cameroon, do. We get to plenty, so many things where we really want to complain to you. See these people where they kill us, not the people where they get for protect me, yeah. Oh, no. Our children, they for prison. Our leaders, they for prison. Hey. But they've been calling for dialogue. Now who and who go talk, oh. That's why we pray to God. Heal our land, heal our land, heal our land. Cause all our people are dying, and our mothers are crying. Heal our land, heal our land, heal our land. Cause all our children are dying, and our mothers are crying. Okay, let's take a minute of silence for our brothers and sisters who have lost their life in the struggle, and our mothers who are living in the bushes, our children suffering in the bushes with no food and no shelter. We pray that the peace return in our land so that we can live in peace. Peace forever. That's what we cry for. We get to plenty, so many things where we really want to complain to you. See these people where they kill us, not the people where they get for protect me, yeah. Our children, they for prison. Our leaders, they for prison. But they've been calling for dialogue. Now who and who got talk, oh. That's why we pray to God. Heal our land, heal our land, heal our land. Cause all our people are dying, and our mothers are crying. Heal our land, heal our land, heal our land. Cause all our children are dying, and our mothers are crying. Say we get to plenty, so many things that we really won't complain to you, Daddy. Now who's how we go so? Mabaminda Buya Limbe.
Many Ambazonians consider it an insult. Others call it a joke. The mere fact that La République du Cameroun thought it could grant special status to the people of Ambazonia. Here's Tanyejude Agwa Ozugen on why this is so annoying.
One of the many death on arrival resolutions adopted at the end of the so-called major national dialogue in Yaoundé was the line sold by La République du Cameroun that Article 62 of one of its two constitutions grants Yaoundé powers to legalize its ongoing recolonization of Ambazonia. Yaoundé is now on record suggesting to the world that it can grant them special status. In this godforsaken union, even more than being called Biafrans, enemies within, or Nigerians, the insensitivity that led Yaoundé to even dare to say Ambazonians can be granted a special status reminds Southern Cameroonians the annexation of their homeland is no accident of history. This is as premeditated a crime against humanity as they come. Whereas the United Nations sanctioned the putting in place of a union made up of two states equal in status, La République du Cameroun met in Yaoundé as the colonialists met in Germany in 1884. One of the two United Nations trusteeship territories, La République du Cameroun, has promoted itself to the rank of colonizer to the point that it has no shame in saying it can grant special status to Ambazonia. What is wrong with Yaoundé? What can the Biya regime not understand about two states equal in status? Do they still think Ambazonians are in the 1950s and 1960s? Nothing is more foolish than to believe your own lies. That is what the Biya regime is doing. They are swearing an oath that they have powers to grant Ambazonia special status, and Mr. Biya even rushed to try to brainwash the young French leader Emmanuel Macron into believing that this is an offer Ambazonians will celebrate. Evil has a way of biting the devil in the butt. That is what is befalling the Biya regime. The mere acknowledgement that Ambazonia has special status is confession that La République does not have sovereignty over Southern Cameroons. The Biya regime found itself confessing to the whole world that there are two Cameroons, equal in status, in need of being preserved as such, lest one of them, colonial Cameroon, be allowed the liberty and powers to be awarding special status to its sovereign neighbor, the Southern Cameroons. This is Tanyejude Agwa Ozugen for Ambazonia Calling.
Ambazonia will be developed not by those our parents call the long crayons, not those empty big book people who call themselves elites, but by the army of hard-working citizens willing to roll up their sleeves and get dirty.
The foreign and local NGOs and journalists suddenly crusading for schools' resumption are not doing so out of altruism and would be hard put to deny the charge of hypocrisy and self-interest.
My love for you, girl, I know if it take you out of sight. Baby girl, I do anything for you, eh. I do anything. Baby girl, I do anything for you, eh. Baby girl, I do anything for you, eh. Baby girl, I do anything for you, eh. I do anything for you, eh. Baby girl, I do anything for you, eh.
The Member of Parliament for the SDF in Jakiri, Honorable Joseph Weber, delivered one of those his beautiful speeches on Sunday. Barrister Manjong Jutambe has been looking at the speech. He focuses now on the aspects of the speech that touch on the conditions for a third-party negotiated settlement.
Honorable Joseph Weber's speech left some like me with mixed feelings, to laugh with joy or cry at our endless efforts to prolong the desert crossing to the promised land for Ambazonians. The honorable gentleman from Jakiri is on the same wavelength. He identifies himself now with the diaspora and recognizes the problem the diaspora has. It is no longer West Cameroon that we hear from his mouth, but Ambazonia. However, when it comes to the negotiated settlement and how to go about it, Honorable Joseph Weber, like Siseko Ayuktabe, Dr. Cho Ayaba, Dabney Yerima, and a host of other Ambazonians, has a long line of preconditions. He wants a credible and neutral third party, indirectly saying that he neither considers Switzerland to be neutral nor worthy mediators. Finding a perfectly neutral mediator would be as difficult as visiting Jesus Christ in the hotel next door. Honorable Weber listed the countries he would like to have around the negotiating table, and no surprise that he did not list a single country that is not already at the table. It has been clear for a while now that no other Ambazonian leader can list any country or international organization they would want at the table that is not already there, or that cannot be made to join those who are already there. Is Honorable Weber making a conscious decision to join other Ambazonian leaders in accepting to prolong our desert crossing experience to independence by faulting a process he and other Ambazonian movements are invited to help set up? In setting preconditions, Honorable Weber, like the many other Ambazonians who subscribe to a similar school of thought, not only act deft with respect to the call from the international community, he also behaves as if Ambazonian poses preconditions and Paul Biya and La Republique will not have preconditions of their own. To the 5 preconditions posed by Honorable Weber, it is easy to see La Republique posing their own 5 preconditions. Yaoundé will be glad to state that they will go to negotiations only if independence and separation are off the agenda, and only if Ambazonian self-defense volunteers first agree to lay down their weapons. This can only start a useless time-wasting game between the parties prior to getting to the table of negotiations. Once talks on talks hold, the parties can pose conditions at that level, with everyone at the table already, not provide an excuse for the international community to conclude that we are not serious and for La Republique du Cameroun to walk away. Posing preconditions is a gift to La Republique, which it can only use to prolong its stay in Ambazonia. La Republique will cherish the opportunity to delay the opening of negotiations and increase the chances of trying to score a military victory, which, though impossible, will still result in more Ambazonians being slaughtered. Palestinians have posed one precondition since 1948. They want to destroy the state of Israel before they can accept a Palestinian state. Needless to say that those conditions will never be met, and posing them has prolonged Palestinians' walk to freedom. Is that what some of our leaders truly wish for Ambazonia? This is Manjong Judambe for Ambazonia Calling.
This is a lesson that every Ambazonian should know by heart from real politics. The world won't roll over just to please the heart to satisfy in the ranks of our people. Those who choose to be spoilers will be free to do as they please.
I recognize the fact that even those I consider to be egoistic or to be selfish, I recognize the fact that the intent is good. People simply think I have the best route to Boya, I have the shortest way, the easiest way. I recognize all that.
The search for a completely neutral country will never be successful because there is no such thing as a perfectly neutral country to serve as mediator.
We should trust in our cause that is embedded in truth and it's God ordained, and we should hope for the best while expecting challenges.
Our job is to ensure that the negotiations work for what we seek, and that our leaders and negotiating team do not sign onto any deal that falls short of outright independence for our homeland. In other words, our destiny is in our hands, not in the hands of the mediator.
Where is the war in southern Cameroon? Is the war at La Republique? No. So who has crossed borders? La Republique du Cameroon. They need to ask La Republique du Cameroon to cease fire, because who also drew first blood? La Republique du Cameroon. So you can ask someone defending to stop violence.
The job of Ambazonians today is to make the Swiss-led process be the equivalent of the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, whose implementation by the United Nations culminated in the independence of South Sudan in July 2011.
Drum roll, please. And welcome to our Nyamfoka of the Week segment. We don't do foolish, but when there are capital fools out there, we make it our duty to find them, and every week we crown one of them the Nyamfoka of the Week.
Veronique Vatimfa is joining me here in the studio. She's got our rundown of the kings and queens of foolish for this week.
Finishing in third place this week is one of those who are waiting for night to fall before they betray Ambazonia. Nick Santos is his name. He was caught pants down on camera in a video gone viral on social media, in which he said the things he would never have said in public. And just like that, one more enabler is ousted. Over dinner, beer and wine with his guest, Nick Santos, may be high from the booze, told the truth he has been hiding from Ambazonians. He is really in this revolution for the ministerial position he hopes to occupy in the Cameroons, a position he had the illusions of grandeur of occupying in the interim government group. Nick Santos is this week's third place finisher for the crown of shame, the Nyamfoka of the Week.
Nyamfoka them all.
In the position of runners-up this week is one fellow whose full names Ambazonia Calling did not even manage to find. On a social media video this week, he turned on insults on the Ambazonia diaspora for joining the sovereign people of their homeland to fight for restoration of independence. According to this selfish fellow, who would rather the diaspora allowed the people on ground zero to be slaughtered by the Biya regime, he claims that the Southern Cameroonian diaspora is the most wicked diaspora on earth. For leaving out his useless self and insulting the Ambazonian diaspora, this fellow, whom we shall not even bother to name, is this week's second place finisher of the crown of shame, the Nyamfoka of the Week.
Nyamfoka them all.
Winning the crown this week and doing so in style is another buffoon who, along with the likes of Lisinge Ndive and Paddy Asanga, made the trip to Yaoundé from Germany to kiss up to the colonizers. Epa Elad sang for his breakfast, lunch and supper while in the Cameroons, seeking out and granting interviews to glorious unknown TV hosts in which he, like Barrister Satlai of California, literally begged the colonizers to fund lawsuits that he and other like-minded idiots believe they can initiate and win against leaders of Ambazonian liberation movements. For being such a buffoon, Epa Elad is this week's winner of the crown of shame, the Nyamfoka of the Week.
Nyamfoka them all.
This is Veronique Vatimfa for Ambazonia Calling.
Ambazonia Calling, you are in the heart of the news shrine. Call us the Kalakuta Republic of commentary, opinion, and editorials.
We've got an explosive report here about what exactly took Mr. Biya to Lyon, France, where he met with French President Emmanuel Macron, what was said, and how bad relations are between the two. Here is Lambert Bomb.
Ambazonia Calling has learned that French President Emmanuel Macron is not amused by Mr. Biya's efforts to minimize the now inevitable collapse of the Cameroons. So disappointed is a young French leader that is meeting earlier this week with Paul Biya in Lyon, France, degenerated behind closed doors into warnings from Paris that Yaoundé should expect to be on its own unless it sticks more faithfully to the new line in the sand drawn by Paris. According to our sources, the French leader, who is young enough to be Biya's grandson, lashed out at Biya for playing cat and mouse with him on the phone far too many times. France is not happy that Yaoundé has listened more to the hawks of war within the security apparatus, and that the Biya regime has turned to and relied more on countries like Israel, Morocco, and the United Arab Emirates than on France for security, military, and even political support. How did Biya get to Lyon in the first place? Ambazonia Calling has learned that Paris ordered Biya to report to Lyon, offering him to use the pretext of attending the conference on HIV/AIDS as a smokescreen for organizing the much-needed briefing the French wanted to hear, as well as receive new instructions on how to proceed. Mr. Biya was told in no uncertain terms that if he did not show up in Lyon, he was on his own going forward. France reportedly threatened to play the same card on Biya as they did on former Ivorian leader Laurent Gbagbo if Biya did not turn up in Lyon. Complaints by Mr. Biya that he had acted per the advice of the former French ambassador recalled by Paris in early July failed to convince. Reassurances that Yaoundé was now abiding by the advice provided by the newly accredited French ambassador in Yaoundé did not suffice to calm tempers. Mr. Biya tried to avoid traveling to Lyon, citing protests planned by Baas supporters anywhere he went in Europe. Biya said he did not deserve the humiliation he suffered when he ended up being kicked out of Geneva, Switzerland in early July. Ambazonia Calling has learned that this is how the French promised to clamp down on any protest in Lyon. And boy oh boy, did the French work overtime to prevent Baas activists from protesting dictatorship in Cameroon, going to the extent to savaging Baas supporters. French security forces turned a blind eye as bodyguards of Mr. Biya brutalized, kicked, dragged, and molested protesters in the streets of Lyon. Mr. Biya's account of how well the so-called major national dialogue had gone failed to convince Mr. Macron, who insisted on Yaoundé sticking with the international mediation process put in place by Switzerland. Mr. Macron demanded that Yaoundé should maintain its participation at the Swiss-led process, joining his voice to that of the Americans, who are calling for negotiations without preconditions, even before the ink has dried on the resolutions of the failed so-called major national dialogue. This is Lambert Mbom for Ambazonia Calling.
Our youth demo, they can't finish. Our boys demo, they don't finish. From Manfred to Boya, from Bamenda to Southwest, no shade every day, oh, killing every day. People they die every day, like say they been a chicken. My people lay, prayer is the key. Oh, may we pray, oh, may we pray, oh, may we pray, may we pray, oh, may we pray, may we pray. Jesus.
Do not forget, we've got that new segment that's coming up, Big Mob Corner. Jackery Day, Big Mob Day, Tory Long, na time short.
Ambazonia's freedom, Africa's liberation. Our theme is coined from the very teachings of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Independence of Ghana is not complete until Africa is totally liberated. If Ambazonia's freedom is not achieved, then Africa cannot talk of its liberation. So we have come to Ghana to start a new dynamism in the continent of Africa.
The monk from Ibalikumato says that from the very moment that the Member of Parliament from Jakiri indicated that crimes had been committed, attention should have been paid. Here's the monk.
What I think? Seriously? What I think is that from the day Honorable Joseph Wilbur stood in the Parliament of the Cameroons and spoke his mind as every representative is supposed to do, the international community should have stood by him. His niece was raped in BOYO, a student. Students were chanting no violence as gendarmes continued their barbarism. What I think? I'm thinking of BBC Mancho locked up. For what? I'm thinking of a personal friend with a PhD in electrical engineering wasting time in what they call Kondingwe. What I think? I am thinking of the families of all wrongly imprisoned citizens of Ambazonia in a country and situation where they do not have 100% control of the language of their imprisonment, nor the truth of their circumstances. I want to think only of Abdul Karim, but I can't. There are too many of my people in the wrong place at this time, and I have only one person to blame. This is the monk from Ibalikumato for Ambazonia Calling.
It takes a lot of foolish to get into the Nyamfuka Hall of Shame. And here to present the new inductee into the Hall of Shame, here's XXX, XXX.
Sisiko Ayub Tabe and his team auto-proclaim himself President of the Republic.
We would do a disservice to the kings and queens of foolish out there if we did not find paramount kings and queens to rule over them and serve as second in command to the likes of Atanganji Paul and other persons of disrepute inducted into the Nyamfuka Hall of Shame.
He desecrated the symbols of the nation, created his own flag, which is unpardonable, created their own national anthem, unforgivable.
This week, one moron, a real scumbag, knocked on the door and is getting admitted to join the likes of GCE cheat Ikema Patrick, Form 2.5 dropout and ex-convict at Tanganji, and child abuser Jume Franklin. The moron we are inducting into the Nyamfuka Hall of Shame this week would, every once in a while, when he is lucid, when he is not going around picking go and eating, and when he is not seeing illusions in which he claims God anointed him to win presidential elections.
Children are not going to school, hospitals are burned by his disciples, phones have abandoned their palaces because of his disciples, human life and people are killed without mercy.
When this dry head is not lost in the clouds of the weed he must be high on. He claims to teach law and to serve as a so-called pastor. This oversized attention seeker, who in a moment of rare lucidity earlier this year slammed the Biya regime for offering schooling without an education, and an education that cannot lead to jobs, backed from a TV set on the need for the colonialists to execute Seseko Tabe and 9 of his closest collaborators, who were sentenced to life behind bars.
So when I heard he was sentenced, I said, yes, that will bring deterrence.
This blood-hungry, stark-raving scumbag said his wish would have been to be handed the gun and given the opportunity to execute Seseko and Co. himself.
Should be sentenced and shot on the spot. That's what would have been better.
He would want them tied to a post at one of the town's main square and to have children returning from school watch as he executes them.
I expected the government to place 10 electric poles at Central Town, line them up there, give me a cover, I will shoot. So that children who are coming from school should see an example of how people that can abuse the law of a nation are treated.
This is not foolishness. This is madness by a man who should have his head examined and who has no business teaching anyone, let alone teaching law or preaching the word of God. He was fuming in the mouth in his condemnation of the apostles of Sesekwa Yoktabe. This man's performance reminded us why the Biya regime must get emergency assistance to get their psychiatrist hospital, Centre Jamo, working properly again.
Okay. It is not normal, Mr. Mundi, that we clamor and say somebody is out for peace, or we need peace and in search for peace, we release somebody that have destroyed peace. What are we talking about?
This man, Mu Ata, should be in a ward, not on a TV set. But while waiting for the Biya regime to get its act together, we are this week inducting this scumbag, moron of the century and stark-raving mad so-called teacher and pastor into the infamy of the Nyanfuka Hall of Shame. This is XXX for Ambazonia Calling.
Along with a lion heart, she's just along with a lion heart. She's along with a lion heart, she's just along with a lion heart.
No one should be too afraid to call sin by its name. Scamming is one of the biggest problems we have in this revolution. Here once more is Barrister Manjong Jutambe, who has been taking a look at just how many scams there are out there.
Ambazonians have seen one scam too many since the onset of this revolution. Sadly, I'm not here to announce that the scamming is over. On the contrary, I'm here to confirm that it is not only well and breathing, it is thriving. The scams are multifaceted. They range from political, financial, and all the way to dumb as foolish. The perpetrators all have the same goal: defraud Ambazonians of hard-earned dough, donated in the mistaken belief that they were contributing their widow's mite as a mark of their support in serving and financing their revolution. Now, before I get to the meat of this piece, let me put out this disclaimer. Not all fundraisers in this revolution have been scams. A lot of good work has been done by so many Ambazonians with resources they have succeeded in mobilizing. But that has been the exception, not the rule. For those who've been very focused on the happenings around this revolution, the mother of all scams has evolved around gun running.
When I send AK, when I send much money for AK-47, when I send money.
Funds raised for the now infamous My Trip to BOYO campaign went down a bottomless hole, as some claimed they were buying iron and granules from next door Niger. Before My Trip to BOYO was laid to rest, social media airways were awash with the AK-47 campaign. Folks in South Africa triumphed over their rivals based in Belgium to become the sole owners of that campaign. Then the Sniper Project was rolled out, along with the Contender Force Project. Remarkably, we've seen guns advertised as having been freshly delivered on Ground Zero, only to later find out the damn stuff had been photoshopped from the website of the South African police. Last week, another phony funding scheme was launched. It seeks $20 per person, and it is casting its net for 10,000 volunteers they hope will be silly enough to give with a generous heart. As if Ambazonians have not been squeezed dry enough, there is the other project to buy a pin, and by the same token, buy a piece of Ambazonia that you can wear closest to your heart. This was rolled out the same week the IG group said it was re-engineering what it calls the compulsory independence dues. Oh yes, you heard me right, compulsory independence dues. One must wonder what some of these guys coming up with these money-making schemes are smoking. Where did they get the legitimacy to make decisions they audaciously dub compulsory? Please accept apologies if your own scam has not been mentioned in this report. The list is too long to possibly acknowledge everyone out there. We've not had time to mention stuff like the London oil deal and contributions to support the interim government of the Ambazonia Sahrawi Republic that were invited to present our case at the United Nations. We did not mention the Amber coin deal, and we are only coming to you the week of the launch of those Amber bonds. Too many Ambazonians donated to SCBC, believing it was publicly owned as advertised, only to later find out to their chagrin that it is privately owned by the likes of Milan Artam and Siseko Julius Ayuktabe and Princess Harriet of Skapak. The once in a long time treasury of Ambazonia reminded us in a long audio this week of just how corrupt the IG group was before the emergence of SAKO. The overall effect of collecting without accounting for resources mobilized and of everyone collecting in the name of Ambazonia has been donor fatigue. A very bad thing for a revolution in their need of financial liquidity for sustenance. It is very sad also knowing that the bravest self-defense volunteers on Ground Zero still do not have the iron and granules with which to defend themselves, their families and their homeland. A situation that Mami B had to shout out against this week.
When they say me they send money for now, me they buy materials send for now, the one when I for go fight La Republic with 10 guns. So that when I go die, no fire on the mountain. There's no fire on the mountain. We need money.
These and many more must leave any reasonable Ambazonian wondering out loud like Mami B did. If Ambazonia's quest to restore its independence is an exercise in honesty and determination, or simply an effort of scamming in excelsis. This is Manjang Jut Ambe for Ambazonia Calling.
Ramagade, legede, oh, Rabosatala, Brosagade, Lika Brazandala, Jesus. Papa God, intervene for we, do for we, as you do for the Israelites. The way who they suffer, in their life say you don't forget we. Papa God, intervene for we. Orphans are crying, widows are crying, fatherless children are crying, the less privileged are crying. Oh, may we pray. Oh, may we pray. Oh, Northwest and Southwest, when I come together, may we pray. Oh, prayer is a key. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, let me pray. Oh, let me pray. Oh, let me pray.
Big Mob Corner. Jackery Day, Big Mob Day, Tory Long, na time short. It has been simply sickening what has been going on in Nigeria from the moment the Naira 10 were captured and then rendition to Cameroon. It has not stopped. Asylum seekers and refugees who are targeted continue to be rendition to Cameroon. It is an abuse that one of our sisters in Nigeria is putting the Nigerian government on blast for. She's a person for the Big Mob Corner this week.
My brothers, my sisters, them, I agree to now. This is a call for concern from a Nigerian sister to a brother or sister or mother or father. I beg, The time when Nigeria they suffer from xenophobic attacks for South Africa, the whole world shout, oh, everybody cry, oh, people talk, oh, from other countries everywhere for this world, people talk, oh, South Africa, please stop what you're doing to Nigeria. But nobody shouts when Nigeria they do anything to other country people. It is not fair. Tomorrow, it is not going to be South Africa again. Let us be very watchful. If you want to satisfy your heart or yourself to tell yourself that waiting concern you, that word where they kill Nigeria, it go kill your generation when the time comes. Anyway, this story now waiting pay me pass related to the consistent arrests by President Muhammad Buhari on Cameroonians where we say they come seek asylum for Nigeria. I know we can't how many times I don't meet Nigerians for airport where they deport them from Dubai. I know we can't how many Nigerians who I meet for airport where they deport them from Oman, from Libya. They synagogue Church of All Nations in their numbers. They give them money and food. They made they start life. Now they hear me so. Nigeria waiting in Nigeria where una go dey deport Cameroonians. Send them. No be say una just deport them, make they go for their house though. Una deport them, make them go for prison. Una they carry people wey be say don't run from war and dictatorship, evil government where they just catch people kill. Una deport them, give them back into the hands of the killers, make them kill. One thing is certain: if Nigerians don't speak up, if Nigerians don't open their mouth and talk, there will be a time no country in this world will be habitable for Nigerians. And that time, it will only come when there is insurgencies in the whole of Nigeria that you will not even find where to seek asylum. Not even in the neighboring Ambazonia or Cameroon, where you have sent all the people backpacking into the dungeons of the killer that they call President Biya, wherever he is. Truth be told, for the love of this Africa, for the love of everything we concern your neighbor, anybody where you see for road, you don't know who will give you water or food to eat or drink. If you see anything we no good, speak out. Yes, I know some of you go say plenty things that happen for Nigeria. They keep people for north. More yellow show what they prison waiting they don't do. This one, that one, that one. Talk the one way you go feel talk now. Tomorrow your conscience go guide you, say you don't open your mouth. Talk one thing before. Sometimes internal problems they need to solve easily, but it is better to manage them. But external problems, we saw what happened with xenophobic attacks in South Africa. Before we knew it, they burnt down Nigerians, burnt down the High Commission. Please, before we even forget, I'm sure many Nigerians don't even know where the High Commission of Nigeria, where Nigerian staff work in Cameroon. You know, even though Cameroon, sorry for now they deport. In fact, now they deport Ambazonians. Forget say High Commission day for Ambazonia. It is Boya. Maybe plenty people never sabi that one. Na Boya, na Boya. The thing day. Now there plenty Cameroonians they go collect Nigerian visa, enter. If Ambazonians decide to be xenophobic, that High Commission now 2 seconds thing, they go burn and finish. They go burn innocent Nigerians there. It go make news. People go shout. People go cause the country will do that kind of act. But you forget to know, say your president they use DSS deport and send into evil dungeons. Plenty Cameroonians when they enter this country. In case you know they read news, for 2017, they sent back 11 from Abuja Nera Hotel here. That one soft no do for Cross River. 3-4 months later, then deport 41 back. Then they prison. There's evidence, there is list for all these things. A president for this country collect money for their head though. They prison now. After they talk to Una today they waiting. I'll be 11th of October 2019. Then deport this morning 31 people from Taraba State. Send go Cameroon straight to prison. The God that is watching over Africa is definitely a God of justice. The God that is watching over Africa is definitely the God of justice. As I am shouting my voice now, speaking out as an African. The African that I know that will be liberated someday by unity, no matter how giant evil can be, is definitely a God of justice. And that time will come when justice will prevail.
In other place. If you are Ambazonian, you're not going to find a show like this wherever you look in the world, on the World Wide Web. This is unique. This is Ambazonia Calling. Ambazonians have pleaded, begged, petitioned, marched, danced, done everything to get the attention of the world so the world could turn, take a look at what's going on in Ambazonia, intervene and bring a solution. What happens when they do? Here's the monk from Ibali Kumato.
How many times and how many hours Ambazonia citizens have marched, sang, stood, sat, begged for the international community to do something to end the genocide of Ambazonia people. Too many times. Then out of the blue, citizens hear that one free country is putting its neck out there in response to the cries of Ambazonia citizens. What do they get? Smearing of their name by the very people they are trying to help. Now, some Ambazonia citizens will say, Swiss want this or that from Ambazonia. Go ask any Swiss citizen on the street if and when they are moving to Ambazonia. Here is the cold water gari of the situation. As I see it, the so-called international community is not a pillar on the boundary of Franco-Cameroon and Ambazonia. The international community is not a place one goes to. The so-called international community is not a pillar on the boundary of Franco-Cameroon and Ambazonia. The international community is not a place one goes to. The international community is a virtual bubble of individuals from different countries, each with its own systems. That is, the engines that run the communities of these countries. But they have agreements and protocols that have been put in place for there to be smooth transactional relationships between them. As a nation, Ambazonia, by implication Ambazonia citizens, like it or not, will have to take a moment to understand what the playground looks like, understand the rules of the game before crying foul about anything. Or else, there are referees who can blow the whistle and say at any time, game over. There's more. This is the monk from Ibadikumato for Ambazonia Calling.
Ambazonia Calling. You are in the heart of the news shrine. Call us the Kalakuta Republic of commentary, opinion, and editorials.
With little to no mastery of the international system which the monk was describing there a moment ago, one can easily understand why for a while Ambazonians are going to fumble the diplomatic football. In the lead up to the last General Assembly of the United Nations in September, many within the Ambazonian revolution were indicating that had it not been for the Swiss-led process, there would be a case before the Security Council of the United Nations. Tanyi Jude Agwa Ozugen says the Security Council would be where the Ambazonian restoration quest will go to die.
Something in the Ambazonian psyche keeps getting it wrong about international mediation, causing us to proffer a series of self-damaging assertions. One of those troubling assertions is coming from talking heads and even from those at the extreme pinnacle of academia. They argue that having the Ambazonian matter deliberated at the Security Council is the silver bullet the restoration quest has been waiting for. You have to wonder what they have been smoking. Though the Security Council is the UN's most powerful body, the only one with the authority to issue legally binding resolutions that can be backed up by sanctions, blue-helmeted peacekeepers, or by force of arms, it is a political graveyard of the Ambazonian restoration quest because of the overriding influence of France's veto power. France is one of the most strategic and closest supporters of UN peacekeeping and the fifth largest contributor to the UN peacekeeping budget. More so, France has staffed the post of head of UN Department of Peacekeeping Operations for almost 2 decades. It is the former colonial power of many of the countries with growing irredentist sentiments. A pen holder on some of the largest peacekeeping operations and has sponsored or co-sponsored an average of almost 2/3 of the draft resolutions dealing with peacekeeping subsequently adopted by the Security Council. This is quite an impressive resume, but certainly not the kind of resume that will do the job for us. I can bet with my life that France will employ the use of her veto power to eviscerate our restoration quests at the Security Council even before China could use hers. This is Tani Jude Agwa Ozugen from Ambazonia Calling.
A few minutes ago, we had that paper taking a look at the financial scams, the scams linked to gun running and to self-defense that have been going on in this revolution. Innocentia wonders whether there are also some political scams. Is hostage-taking real? Is kidnapping real? The case of Ntumfoyn of the SDF. Here's Innocentia.
There is a high chance that respecting our elders is eroding as a cultural norm in our society. It readily would explain why many in my generation and I, those of us 45 and older, have found it incomprehensible and morally reprehensible that Ntumfoyn, the Venerable One, the man the mention of whose name brought great pride to the hopeless across colonial Cameroon, the man who shook Yaoundé in the 90s, handed Biya his first political defeat at the ballot box, and caused Biya to perfect the art of stealing elections and becoming a professor on how to lose elections but be the victor at the end of the day. I'm still talking about Ntumfoyn. It is unfathomable, if you ask me, that Frundi would be kidnapped, scrap that, arrested according to the ADF, by any son born of woman, and not once, twice. The pattern got me thinking, and one question kept on recurring in my mind. What if the kidnappings, scrap that, arrests, were all a hoax, a scam, mounted by Ntumfoyn and his henchmen? Think about it. Was the car of the SDF strongman leading the convoy as they headed to Kumbo, April 27th, with the casket of late Honorable Joseph Bananzem? If his car was not leading the way, was it immediately behind the hearse vehicle carrying the casket? Was he somewhere in between or at the tail end? It is important to think through these questions because depending on the position, the entire convoy would have had to be pulled over. Or was the entire convoy waylaid and Ntumfoyn and his driver identified, pulled out and kidnapped, scrap that, arrested, then released in good enough time to catch up with the rest of the events at the Bananzem funeral? Can those who wrote this script tell us whether the rest of the convoy cared to stop? I mean, the chairman of the SDF, leader of Cameroon's opposition and father of democracy in Cameroon, had just been kidnapped, scrap that, arrested by armed and dangerous men. Did it not mean anything to anyone? Or does the chairman no longer mean as much to anyone? What's the word I'm looking for? Gravitas. Does the chairman no longer command that gravitas? How could he, when there was a second kidnapping on June 28th, leaving a whole chairman to cry, this time about the way he was dragged on his own floor like a dog? Mabu. Do these kids have any respect for anyone? I couldn't tell because once more I had even more questions. I questioned whether Ntumfoyn was picked up by a car and then transferred onto a bike at one point, or it was just his story that, how do I put this without using the L word in the same sentence as the chairman? Oh well, I cannot imagine how lax the security around the chairman's house has become, I cannot imagine the chairman's driver had to take the bullet for the chairman and that there was no other person around that often crowded compound in Tarinkon. Am I still in the 90s? Indeed, I am probably still in the 90s, and I need to remain there in order to understand how a once powerful man plunged so low he is begging to become relevant at all cost. Otherwise, how do you explain that immediately after his kidnapping, scrap that, his arrest, Frundi appeared by his lawyer praising the qualifications of Frundi to be a negotiator between restorationists of Ambazonia and colonial Cameroon. Probably seeing himself in a dead heat with Tumi, Bala, Kawala, Fontem, and Munzo, the man decided to stage a second kidnapping, this time with some added drama, getting dragged like a dog and the careful shooting of his driver on the foot, not life-threatening, thank heavens. And voila, out of a sudden, the SDF issue a statement demanding that unless Biya fixes the problem that he created by declaring war on Ambazonians, the SDF will pull out their parliamentarians. Seriously? What is this old man drunk on? Somebody, give me a cup of that sha too. Innocent here for Ambazonia Calling.
So restoration train is our freedom train.
We've got to do it together, building trust amongst leaders and making sure we make compromises that can take the Ambazonian people to a new horizon.
Oh, Holy Spirit, lead us on the restoration journey of our liberty.
The message we are sending out to all other Ambazonian groups is that we have to work together, because it's only in working together that we would achieve what we want faster.
Oh, Holy Spirit, lead us on the restoration journey of our liberty.
If we do not do that, we are going to be having South Sudan.
So restoration train is our freedom train.
We started off this program with a real gun battle in Malende outside of Muyuka. The gun battles are not limited to Malende, they are all over Ambazonia, and people are getting killed. Lambert Bomb says if you are an Ambazonian and you live on ground zero and you own a knife, a gun, an axe, a spear, a bow and arrow, a rubber gun, a den gun, whatever kind of instrument that you need to defend yourself, please do before the bastards take you out. Here's Lambert Bomb.
The time has come. In fact, it came almost 3 years ago. It came when Mr. Biya declared war on Ambazonia. From that moment, every Ambazonian should have known that they are dead men walking. Every Ambazonian must be equipped for and prepared to defend themselves. Every one of our citizens must be ready to fight for our independence because their own survival depends on victory in this existential struggle. If you live anywhere on ground zero, you must continue to deny consent to be misruled or governed by the colonial bastards from La République. Do not submit to anything organized by the colonizers and their sponsors. If you are currently armed with anything, a rubber gun, a real gun, a knife, a machete, or machine gun, you must never disarm. However, you must never use your tools of self-defense to commit crimes against unarmed civilians. Even as you fight, never forget that countries do not gain independence because they fought and won brave battles and killed hundreds of thousands or millions of people. It is not the longer our independence war that the more likely our independence is. Nope. It is not thanks to the many thousands of colonialists that we kill that we gain independence. In just the same way, it is not by decimating the people of Ambazonia that La République will win this war. This is Lambert Mbom for Ambazonia Calling.
Since the days of John the Baptist, the kingdom of God suffered violence. Let the violent one takes it by force. Show on the ground king. Boom. We the cry, about the pride. Don't tire.
Women are they crying, crying. Boy, are they crying, crying. About what they crying, crying. Me they crying. Una free me, eh. Women are they crying, crying. Boy, are they crying, crying. Me they crying. Una free me, eh. Women are they crying, crying. Boy, are they crying, crying. Me they crying. Una free me,
I'm tired of this like Republic una free. Mama go today inside pay you know the free. We president on the side say all my mafia. Grand ambition, fuck that slogan, no yay. Presido, the pay jaga jaga. Una take all till the we for scatter. They need 102 students for Senate address. Una select 2 Anglo-Boss, escape address. Bia, young, region, prison. Escape who know why man show BBC they for prison. They don't some all we then start to call us Anglo-Fools. Fuck up the government, we ain't tools. Minister for communication, no fit talk good English. Southern Cameroon independence, that's my wish. No good third roads, no seaports, no light, no attack, no airports. President, you overget fake promises. Wait till happen failing us, you bring us diseases. But men are the cry, we are the ask why. You don't come for that chair, you know go shake, you go die.
Women are they crying, crying. Boy, are they crying, crying. About what they crying, crying. Me they crying. Una free me, eh. Women are they crying, crying. Boy, are they crying, crying. Me they crying. Una free me.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
Because you have your army of occupation out in West Cameroon, you believe that when the people will rise, even if you took the whole of the French army and added to yours, you will never bring them down.
And I call on all Cameroon soldiers to lay down their arms within Ambazonia and to turn their arms against the very system that has made them slaves in the land of their birth.
For more stories from around the world, go to the World Wide Web at themissionstribune.com, compassfreepress.com, and africafreedomnetwork.com.
Here is our letter to Joshua.
Dear Joshua, it is so unfortunate, Joshua, that every one of these slaves, all of these Ambazozo slaves, that nobody will accept special status. Can you imagine what good slaves would do? They would run, they would crawl, they would be on their knees, they would beg you, they would thank you, they would offer sacrifice to you, they would venerate you. House slaves used to do the same thing, Joshua. But the people of Ambazonia, they are wise, they are tough, they are ready for you. Did you see the young man in Milif? Oh, there was a postcard today from Milif. Apparently some of your boys who have moved away from the bees. Now they're no longer feeding the mother bee that you are. They're taking care of Ambazonia. They're bringing some nectar home, and they're going to be looking for some blood. If you take any battles to them, they're going to draw some blood, Joshua. The guys are well armed, to the teeth, well trained. Looks like you trained them for us. Thank you for your generosity. Now they're just looking for you to take down. I'm talking of those young men from Emitrix. They are tough. They took the war to your boys. Did you hear from the headstrong parliamentarian from Jakiri? He sent out a video message. I think he targeted you. Just said, I don't want to see the special status, and you don't have a right to give me any special status. He insulted your arrogance, your illegitimacy, your colonial mentality, your everything. It was as if, lack of respect. You know him. That's the kind of person he is. No respecter of colonialists. The no-nonsense Wilbur, you know. The guy for whom you cannot draw a line in the sand, that's him. I thought you said you were the best people of the other guy, the older guy. But the grandson, also, you went to give a report as the colonial governor of the overseas province of French Cameroon? Jesus Christ. What's happening to you? All these 37 years in power, you've never ever thought about how to become president? Just a pupil, even of your grandson? It looks like Lyon was not a very good session for you. Apart from the fact that the French security forces kept the protesters away, beat them up very badly, allowed your bodyguards to rough them up, turned a blind eye when you brutalized them. Very unlike Geneva, where your bodyguards were dragged to court, a judgment issued, and a suspended sentence handed down. That's what we're talking about when we talk about rule of law. But France, that's third world. It's interesting to hear all the stuff that grandson Manu Macron wants you to do. He wants you to pursue the negotiations. He wants you to set a good trap for the Ambazonians. He can see them falling into the trap. Good luck. It's not that easy. And please stop telling your first slave to go out there and tell people you are not in mediation, you don't have a mediator in this struggle. And please remind your first slave that they did not correct the report coming out of the major so-called national dialogue, page 19. Bullet 8, where you say you had a mediator dealing with the radical diaspora. Clean that up before you tell Jean Afrique the other nonsense. And when you do, come and clean up people's brains as well. Stuff that people have recorded because it happened. There are no tricks here to be played, Joshua. This is not like an election that you're going to rig. This is the real deal, Joshua. You bring some paperwork to show that you have sovereignty, they give you the place. But without that, you're done. It's like with Bakassi. You're done. You're out. What else is left to be said, Joshua? We will see you at the negotiations where we will kick your butt out of Ambazonia. It's a promise.
From our studios here in Washington, D.C., our producer is Jeff McCoy. Our music today is from Ken Wanaku, the monk from Balikumato, William Ford, an ambassador of blessed memory, Eric Matisse on the web at soundimage.org, and Prince Ajwa Alemanji of Ajam Sonic Kitron, USA. Ambazonia Calling is a joint production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. You can find us on the web at www.themissionstribune.com, www.compassfreepress.com, and www.africafreedomnetwork.com. Next Sunday is another day. Until then, keep the spirit, keep the faith, keep up the fight for justice and independence for Ambazonia. Stay Amba strong.